I had spent 3 full months preparing for this wedding. But the moment I truly sensed something was wrong didn't happen at the ceremony, it was much earlier. It's just that I had to crash into the wall of reality to finally feel the pain. I remember when I nervously walked out in my wedding dress for the fitting. Ryan was staring at his phone the whole time, and without even glancing at me, muttered, looks great, Natalie. You look good in anything." Then, when we were confirming the venue, he spaced out, staring blankly out the window at the road. I awkwardly called his name, and in that moment, I already began to doubt everything. I had even poked at him drunkenly before, asking if he regretted this. But now I wondered, was it too late for regrets? "Don't play with me," I had said to him. That day I thought about so many things. I was terrified that after we got married he would regret it. I was scared that the bond we had since childhood would eventually turn into something pathetic. But even to ask a simple question, I had to half-drunk myself just to muster the courage to speak. And yet, he was even more cowardly than I was. He clearly hadn't let go of that person in his heart, but he still made promises to me. "There's nothing to regret," he said. "Natalie, we're the best match, aren't we?" He even apologized and said, "Sorry, I've just been so busy lately. Maybe I've neglected you. Please trust me, okay?" Sometimes when people fall into this strange sense of self-confidence, they lose all judgment. I was stupid and naive. I believed him. From last night until this very moment, I had been nervous yet excited. My palms were sweating as I put on my gown, and before everything went completely wrong, there were already signs. When I first arrived at the venue, I overheard some relatives whispering that the makeup artist didn't seem very professional, that she looked like she was here to cause trouble. I was confused and a little curious because that makeup team had been recommended by one of Ryan's friends. At the time, I was even happy, thinking maybe I'd been overthinking things. After all, he had started to show more care recently. When I finally walked into the makeup room, I saw the girl everyone had been talking about. Honestly, I was already angry. Her eyes were a little red, and no woman wants to see something like that on her wedding day. This was supposed to be the most important moment of my life. Yet a stranger was here stirring up drama. She had a delicate figure, and the white cocktail dress made her look fragile and beautiful. Even with a mask on, it was easy to guess she was attractive. I didn't say anything. Because I cared about this wedding, I just wanted to downplay everything, minimize the mess. I quietly sat in front of the mirror and waited for her to do my makeup, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't know what was wrong. Maybe she brought personal issues into her work. Still, it was wildly unprofessional. She even smeared my lipstick. I couldn't take it anymore. Just as I was about to say something, Ryan suddenly got up and pulled off her mask. In that instant, both of them burst into tears. I froze. That woman, I finally recognized her. It was Sherry. I had seen her photo in Ryan's computer folder before. We'd even argued about whether to delete that folder or not. After all, no current girlfriend can be completely indifferent about her boyfriend's ex. In the end, he convinced me by saying, "She's part of my youth." But today, at our wedding, his youth showed up. She disguised herself as a makeup artist just to reunite with him. There couldn't be a more humiliated bride than me. All our guests were still waiting outside. With tears in her eyes, Sherry suddenly bowed and apologized. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to see from afar, behind a mask, if you looked truly happy." And with that, she stumbled out of the room. Ryan immediately chased after her. After a few steps, he stopped, turned back to look at me with guilt in his eyes, and said, "Natalie, I'm sorry. I've always thought of you as a little sister." A sister? So in his heart, a little sister is someone he can kiss, hug, take wedding photos with, and even say, "Why don't we just get married?" to? At that moment, as I watched his figure grow smaller in the distance, the word sister echoed in my ears. Every single reason I once loved him vanished in that instant. All that remained in my head was one question. What do I do now? I had not only lost my dignity but also shamed my parents. I didn't dare step outside. But as time ticked by, Ryan had already run off, leaving behind a mess for me to deal with. I was preparing to take off my wedding dress and go out to explain. Whether I faced it or not, the outcome would still cut deep. I had no other choice. Just as I stood up, the door burst open. "Natalie, are you still missing a groom?" Ryan's longtime rival, Ethan, walked in. He looked at me with a smirk that wasn't quite a smile. My first instinct was that he came to laugh at me. After all, I'd helped Ryan's company fight against him countless times. I felt utterly drained and said, "If you're here to laugh at me, you've had your fill, haven't you? I guess my kindness was wasted on the wrong person. Are you sure you want to walk out there like this and break your parents' hearts?" Ethan's tone carried a hint of surprise at my calmness. "Why?" he asked. "Why are you helping me? What's the catch?" I fired off my questions without pausing, but he only grinned and replied, "Maybe I'm just in a good mood today and felt like doing a good deed. But since you're asking, if I help you this time, the next time you'll owe me one." I looked into his unwavering eyes and felt a shiver run through me. But right now, I had no better option. I needed a man to walk out there with me and face all the friends and relatives waiting in the hall. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and sat calmly in front of the mirror to retouch my makeup. Then, at my mom's urging, I took Ethan's arm and walked down the aisle. Ethan was taller than Ryan and had sharper, more defined features. Anyone familiar with Ryan could see the difference at a glance. I went through the motions with Ethan for form's sake, but when the officiant called for the vows, Ethan turned to me seriously and said, "Natalie, you won't regret choosing me." For a moment, I felt a strange discomfort. I instinctively avoided his gaze. After the guests left, my mom finally couldn't hold back her tears. I was at a loss, trying to wipe them away for her. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. "I embarrassed all of us today." She turned to look at Ethan and began to stand, likely wanting to bow and thank him. But Ethan quickly stepped forward and stopped her. "You really don't have to do this, ma'am," he said. "Honestly, I had my own selfish reasons. I like Natalie. She just never saw me before. That's why I had to do something this drastic. After all, every act needs a partner, right?" Ethan was surprisingly decent about the whole thing. He stayed fully in character. First, he arranged for a driver to take my parents home. Then he insisted on giving me a ride himself. But when we arrived at the underground parking lot, I was surprised to find out he had brought a motorcycle. Later, I learned that Ethan wasn't even supposed to be there that day. The highway had been jammed, and he had maneuvered his motorcycle between the cars just to make it in time, to protect the last shred of my dignity. My phone was full of missed calls, including some from Ryan's parents. They couldn't reach him, so they were calling me. The rest were from the company. But in that moment, I didn't feel like responding to anyone. By the time we left, the evening rush hour had passed and the roads were clear. The wind whipped past us as the motorcycle sped along, and I felt as if all the mess of emotions was being blown away bit by bit. But Ethan didn't take me home. Instead, he brought me to his hillside villa. He had already asked someone to prepare a bath in advance, complete with aromatic oils and a relaxing massage function. By the time I stepped out of the bath, it was already 10 p.m. I had to admit, after everything, I didn't feel quite as exhausted anymore. The yard was filled with fireworks. I leaned against the balcony railing, resting my hands, and suddenly the sky lit up with a spectacular show. In the glittering lights, faintly, I could make out a few words. "Natalie, will you consider me?" I stared blankly at the sky, stunned. Ethan's voice came from behind me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have given you more time, but I've been planning these fireworks for a while now. Honestly, I even thought about knocking you out and bringing you here yesterday." Under the dim lights and brilliant fireworks, I clearly saw Ethan's ears turn red. Everything that happened today was overwhelming. Ethan and I had grown up in the same neighborhood, but he never talked much. He always looked like someone who didn't want to be approached. I, on the other hand, was a loud and outgoing kid. Even though he barely responded, I still kept going to him, dragging him into games, bringing him snacks. At first, he was very cold. Then one day, he had a fever, and I was the one who found out. All the adults were out, so I stayed with him and took care of him the whole afternoon. From that moment on, he became the really good guy in my heart. Ethan didn't like sweets when he was little. Most of the snacks he got, he ended up giving to me. But later, his father struck it rich in business. He was sent abroad during middle school. At the time, I was upset for quite a while. But as time passed and we met again when we were older, everything had changed. We'd both become more distant and awkward, and I couldn't even tell why. When Ethan came back and started his own company, it just so happened that he ended up going head-to-head with Ryan's firm. The two of them couldn't stand each other, and since I worked at Ryan's company naturally, that led to constant friction between us. I eventually became too afraid to even face Ethan. That night, I didn't give Ethan an answer, not just because everything happened so suddenly, but also because I was genuinely exhausted from my relationship with Ryan. When did I start liking Ryan? Exactly. I guess I truly fell for him in my sophomore year of college. It was summer break, and since he lived near my home, he gave me a ride back. Maybe we were just unlucky. It started pouring rain. Thunder crashed as lightning lit up the sky. And Ryan's car hit a roadside barrier on the highway. I hit my head, seeing stars, and Ryan suffered an abdominal injury. Still, he carried my semi-conscious body on his back and walked down the entire highway, step by step. I can still remember him shouting my name over and over, begging me not to fall asleep. When I woke up in the hospital, his eyes were red. He hugged me tightly and said he was terrified something would happen to me. I don't know, was that still within the boundaries of just a sister to him? He remembered my birthday every year. Even when he was away on business trips, he'd send me gifts. He cared about every little injury I had, scheduled all my meals, and had them delivered to my dorm. On holidays, he'd send me things I liked. So when I foolishly believed he had feelings for me, it hit me like a punch to the chest. It was my birthday. I'd planned with my dormmates to finally confess my feelings to him. I wore my favorite dress, spent 2 hours on my hair. But when I arrived, he showed up holding another girl's hand and said, "This is my girlfriend." I was so naive, I thought I'd simply misunderstood. I thought I had made things awkward. After that, I kept my distance on purpose. But he still treated me just as he always had. He told me he saw me as a sister. He'd talk to me about his relationship issues, ask me how to win Sherry's heart. I was caught in a deep emotional conflict. That time was one of the hardest periods in my life. Eventually, just seeing his name on my phone gave me a sense of guilt, like I was doing something wrong. I forced myself to cut those feelings off and play the role of a proper friend. Later, when his company ran into trouble and Sherry broke up with him because of her studies, he started drinking heavily, blacking out in bars night after night. And every time, they called me to pick him up and clean up the mess. He drank so much he ended up with a bleeding stomach. I stayed by his side in the hospital, took care of him, and helped manage his company's affairs. I cheered him on, begged my family for business resources to support him. I even signed up for cooking classes just to make sure he had clean, healthy meals to help his stomach recover. I didn't even understand why I went to such lengths back then. Eventually, the company began to recover, and his confession? It was the most casual thing ever. After dinner, while we were walking in the park, he suddenly grabbed my hand and said, "Natalie, I think we're a good match. Why don't we give it a try?" I was blind, completely clueless. To him, I was just someone convenient, suitable, someone to settle for. That's why his confession was casual. The wedding dress was casual, the ceremony was casual, and as for why he suddenly recommended a makeup artist, I understand now. He must have seen the staff list and recognized Sherry at a glance. From the very beginning, he intended to use my wedding as a stage to resurrect his so-called love story. I stared at the wedding photo hanging in our room and felt nothing but bitter irony. I still remember the moment we took that picture. The photographer had asked him to smile more. And what did Ryan say? "I'm not really someone who smiles a lot, just take the usual shots." But I remembered those photos in his folder at home. He had looked so genuinely happy in them. I stared at the wedding photo hanging in our room for the first time and found it utterly jarring. I was smiling like I was truly happy, while his expression was dull and indifferent. People can be so foolish, always trying to deceive themselves. I had looked at that photo countless times before, but only now was I truly facing the truth. I took it down and threw it in the trash, along with every other thing in the house that was related to the two of us. How ridiculous it was to be someone who wallowed in sentimental gestures. I had bought so many things to symbolize our relationship: matching watches, rings, clothes, shoes. Ryan usually humored me for one day, then shoved them into some drawer, forgotten. I dug everything out from the bedside table and cleared the entire house of anything that held traces of our past. It was like trying to wipe away that part of my life altogether. I thought about selling the house, but I couldn't reach Ryan. The property was under both our names. I also held some shares in the company, but I didn't want to bother with them anymore. I had never enjoyed that kind of work in the first place. So I sold my portion without caring who the buyer was. When I finally met the person face to face, I realized, somewhat belatedly, that it was one of the founders who had fallen out with Ryan. He teased me and said, "Are women really this vengeful? Now that I've got your shares, Ryan's not going to have a good time." "Think whatever you want," I replied flatly. "Let's just get the paperwork done quickly." Do I hate Ryan? I'm not even sure. I just felt exhausted. I didn't want anything more to do with him. I sold my shares to that guy simply because he offered the highest price. What he planned to do with Ryan afterward was his business. I was too tired to care anymore. With the money in hand, I left the city as fast as I could and went on a trip. It felt like I hadn't taken a real break in ages. For so long, everything I did revolved around what Ryan wanted. I didn't even realize when this relationship had drained me of all sense of self. Thankfully, in the end, I walked away with enough money to retire comfortably. Naturally, I've always been a laid-back person who loves to enjoy life. I even had a social media account where I posted about my daily life, and it had gathered quite a few followers. For a long time, I'd been uploading cooking videos, dishes I made for Ryan. My longtime followers started commenting that I'd changed, accusing me of being blinded by love. Honestly, they were right. People who care about you can always sense when something's off. I had just posted a new video about visiting a restaurant and someone commented, "Sis, did you break up?" I was a little embarrassed. They figured it out so quickly. But I still replied with a simple yes. Afterward, I had a friend help me sell off the expensive items from the purge, just things like watches, necklaces, and rings. Everything else, ordinary, everyday stuff, I threw away. Surfing on the island turned out to be a lot of fun. I had always wanted to learn, but I kept putting it off, waiting for Ryan's schedule to open up. And just like that, I waited and waited, worked and worked, but never got the chance. Now I finally came. The sea here was clean, the beach soft, and I spent most of my time lying on the sand doing absolutely nothing. One day, I stumbled upon a local bar that was doing pretty well. The bartender used fresh coconuts grown nearby, and the cocktails were actually really good. I didn't think the drinks were very strong, but after 2 or 3 glasses, my head was spinning a little. I regretted drinking so much on my own. When some creep tried to grope me, I raised my high heel, ready to smash it into his face, when suddenly, someone stepped in and punched the guy to the ground. Honestly, this man had an amazing physique. I couldn't help but be a little stunned. He sighed and said, "Natalie, could you be any more clueless? Getting yourself drunk like this?" I stumbled, and he quickly reached out to steady me. The bar was full of cheap perfume, but he smelled clean and subtly woody, with a faint bitterness that was strangely comforting. In that moment, I didn't feel so dizzy anymore. He led me out of the bar and onto the street. He asked where I was staying. By then, I was a little more sober, and realized it was Ethan. For some reason, seeing him angry actually amused me. I leaned toward him, wrapped my arms around his neck, and teased, "Don't you want to take me home with you? Natalie, do you even know what you're saying right now?" He snapped. "Are you hesitating?" I challenged. "So when it comes to me, men always hesitate, huh?" I looked up at him. "Don't you like me anymore? Am I not pretty? What's wrong with me?" "You're drunk, Natalie." I didn't want to hear the rest of what he was going to say. I kissed him right then and there. The sea breeze was damp and salty as it swept across us. He froze for just a moment, but then deepened the kiss. Inside the narrow car, he held me tightly but restrained, my fingers brushing the beads of sweat on his neck. His eyes were tinged red, wild like a beast. I began to regret it and tried to pull away, but he pinned me down. "Natalie," he said, voice low and hoarse, "I told you, you don't get to regret it anymore." I felt like a little boat lost at sea, repeatedly submerged by waves, only to be pushed back to the surface again. Every time I thought I was about to drown, he gave me just enough breath to stay afloat. He leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "Do you like this?" His raspy voice sank into my chest like static. It tickled. I didn't answer. I kissed him back instead. There are some things you don't need words to say. The car windows fogged up. I lay in his arms, too exhausted to even lift my hand. But I slept more peacefully that night than I had in ages. When I woke up, Ethan had already changed me into a bathrobe. I didn't even know when he had brought me to the hotel. I had been so out of it last night, I didn't even have the strength to lift my eyelids. To my surprise, the hotel wasn't far from where I was staying. He kissed my forehead gently and said, "I cleaned you up a little this morning. There's hot water in the bathroom. Soak for a bit. You'll feel better." I looked around. Drinking had messed things up. I wasn't totally wasted, just a little buzzed. Still, I wasn't sure how to deal with what had just happened between us. Ethan noticed I was zoning out and simply picked me up and carried me to the bathroom. Clutching my robe belt, I awkwardly avoided eye contact. "Want another drink?" he asked. Though drinking on an empty stomach in the morning isn't great. "Let's wait till tonight." Seeing the eager sparkle in his eyes, I immediately jumped away. "Are you serious? My back is killing me." I kicked him out of the bathroom, took off the robe, and sank into the tub. The water was the perfect temperature. But when I saw the marks all over my body, my mood dropped again. Had Ethan lost his mind last night? What happened to the gentleman at the beginning? After the bath, I originally planned to sneak out while Ethan wasn't paying attention, but as soon as I opened the door, he was already walking out of the kitchen with a steaming bowl of seafood congee. Ethan was staying in a presidential suite. The kitchen was huge, and he had even made a few side dishes. I had to admit, after all that physical activity and a deep sleep, I was starving. As a picky food blogger with a taste for good meals, I was surprised. But after finishing his cooking, I genuinely felt a sense of crisis, like he might steal my job one day. I thought I'd eat quickly and slip out while he wasn't looking. But then he invited me to go jet skiing. I was tempted. It did sound fun. "Fine," I told myself, "I'll play, and then I'll leave." He drove the jet ski across the water with me holding on from behind, waves splashing on our faces. The morning sun shimmered through the droplets like a prism. When the jet ski finally came to a stop, out of nowhere, a kiss landed on my cheek. I froze, caught off guard. Things were spiraling further and further out of control. Before I could even react, that kiss moved from my cheek to my lips. His breath tangled with mine. I got scared I might fall into the water, but he kept kissing me. The ocean waves kept crashing onto the shore as I instinctively clung to him, which seemed to give him encouragement. He deepened the kiss. And just when I wanted to push him away, suddenly, my stomach tightened. I realized, in panic, I might be pregnant. By the time the kiss ended, I was so breathless it made my head spin. He lifted me off the jet ski and carried me straight onto the beach. We walked back hand in hand like a real couple. I felt uneasy and tried to pull my hand away, but he held it tighter. Then, without warning, he pulled me into his arms and growled softly into my ear. "Natalie, there's no turning back now." I didn't know what to say. As we neared the hotel, I finally couldn't hold back. "You don't mind my past?" I asked. "Of course I mind," he replied. "Then let's just treat this like a dream. Dreams always end. We should return to reality now." I was about to leave it at that, when he suddenly pulled me into his slightly damp embrace. "Natalie, you idiot," he murmured. "What I mind is that I didn't protect you. I mind that I didn't come back sooner. I mind that I let someone like him hurt you when I should have fought to keep you." I didn't cry when Ryan ran from our wedding. I didn't cry when I went back to that empty wedding suite to pack up my things. But now, hearing those words, tears finally spilled down my cheeks. Truthfully, during this entire time, I'd blamed myself more than I'd blamed Ryan. I hated my own self-delusions, my foolishness for letting someone toy with me like that. But time doesn't run backwards, so I kept forcing myself to look forward. And now, someone was telling me he regretted not protecting me too, that he wanted to treat me gently. It was a feeling I couldn't explain. After being dismissed and overlooked for so long by Ryan, I finally realized I was also someone worth being cherished. This time, I didn't push Ethan away. I used to resist Ethan's presence in my life. I always felt things were moving too fast, or maybe I was just scared. But in that moment, I truly wanted to hold on to him. Traveling as a couple somehow felt more alive than going solo. Ethan was thoughtful and meticulous in everything he did. We went diving together in Semporna. The underwater world was so different from life on land. Little fish swam right past our faces, and then suddenly someone set off fireworks above the water. The sparks fell like stardust, bursting into dazzling trails across the deep blue sea. In the glow, glowing letters emerged, floating in the air. "Natalie, will you marry me?" Ethan was the kind of person who genuinely put effort into everything. He said we'd missed out on too much time before, so now we needed to make the most of every moment. Life passes in the blink of an eye if you don't. After we came back up from the sea, he asked me again what my answer was. I pinched his cheek and teased, "Vice President, aren't you being a little too eager?" My last wedding ended in disaster. My parents haven't even recovered from that shock. If I tell them I'm getting married again, they'll freak out. Honestly, I haven't even wrapped my own head around it yet. But Ethan seemed unusually persistent about this. No matter what we were doing, he always found a way to bring the topic back up. At night, he'd ask me over and over again, "Do you like this?" Until my throat was so sore I could barely answer. All I could do was nod and whisper, "Yes." He suddenly stopped and with a wounded tone said, "So that's it? You're just going to use me without giving me anything in return? Not even a title?" I had no choice but to soften my voice and promise, "You'll get it, Ethan. As long as you want it, I'll give it to you." What followed was like a storm of waves, one after another, completely overwhelming me. We stayed on the road for more than a month, until Ethan's family started pushing hard for him to come home. That was the only reason he finally brought me back with him. At first, I didn't know how to face everyone, but then Ethan made everything clear with just one sentence. When a friend asked who I was, he looked straight at them and said, "She's the one I'm going to marry very soon." Even his family seemed to have been fully briefed in advance. His mother didn't seem surprised at all about our relationship. With cautious enthusiasm, she asked, "Natalie, do you two have a date in mind for the ceremony or getting your license?" "I'm not trying to rush you, dear. I just happen to know someone who's great at picking auspicious dates. I could call him right now if you'd like." As she spoke, she slipped a jade bracelet onto my wrist. "Oh, Natalie, it looks so beautiful on you." The moment I stepped out of the living room, Ethan's little sister squealed in excitement and tugged at my arm. "Sis, you're finally agreeing to marry my brother. Otherwise, why would you wear our family heirloom?" Leaving Ethan's house, I realized I was actually sweating from all the excitement. Ethan had been smiling quietly the whole way home, but that smile didn't last long. When we got back to my place, there was a delivery box sitting at the door. I opened it and found a diamond necklace the size of a pigeon egg inside. On top of it was a card that read, "Natalie, I wish you happiness. Ryan." Wow. This time, Ryan wasn't wrong. I really was happy. I glanced at Ethan, whose smile had completely disappeared, and couldn't help but laugh. I kissed him and said, "Well, at least he finally got one thing right. I am happy." I didn't throw the necklace away, nor did I return it. Free money from Ryan? Why not? I donated it, consider it my contribution to society. Ever since Ethan saw that necklace, his mood had been sour. When I asked why he was so angry, he replied, "I don't even have the right to be mad. Isn't that something?" Well, eventually I did give him that right. It happened on his birthday. He made a wish, and I granted it. That very same day, we went straight to the marriage registration office. It's funny how being with someone you truly like can make you act like a couple of kids. We decided to hold our wedding on one of the islands we had traveled to. It was a small ceremony with very few guests, so not many people actually knew we had gotten married. As for a honeymoon, that would have to wait until Ethan could take a long break from work. Just when I thought Ryan had disappeared from my life for good, one of his friends called me. Ryan had been in a car accident. I didn't feel much, just politely asked how he was doing and when he'd be discharged. Then I added that once he was out, we should finalize the division of the house and car we had co-invested in. That message was relayed to Ryan, and his response was only one sentence. you can have it all. I didn't dwell on it. I accepted his decision without hesitation. There are plenty of people in this world who need money more than I do. But I didn't want to keep it either. I quickly handled all the paperwork and donated it all to an orphanage. I thought that would be the end of it. Later, my best friend Yara came to gossip. "Do you know how Ryan got into that car accident?" she asked. "It's like he lost his mind. He and Sherry were out in the middle of a thunderstorm in the middle of the night, playing some ridiculous emotional game. He crashed trying to chase her down." I chuckled but didn't comment. It wasn't relevant anymore. They clearly didn't have that deep of a connection anyway. After all, when I sold my shares, it was Ryan who got kicked out of the company. One afternoon, while I was fishing by the lake, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. To my surprise, it was Sherry. She was crying, asking why I had kicked someone while they were down. I calmly explained, "I sold my shares before Ryan's accident." She then pressed, "But why didn't you at least tell him? You sold them to his biggest rival. Isn't that revenge? Seriously?" We were all 27 or 28, yet she still acted so naive. Ryan once told me that all he ever wanted was to protect her innocence. Well, he can keep doing that as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. I told her, "Miss Ning, let me be clear. I can sell my shares to whomever I please. And if you're so morally righteous, why did you crash someone else's wedding and steal the groom?" I didn't bother listening to her reply. I hung up and blocked her. Later, I accompanied Yara to a networking event in the industry. I didn't expect to run into Ryan's old buddy, Sean, there. I was about to leave to avoid the drama, but he stepped in front of me. With an annoyed tone, he said, "Natalie, don't you think you've gone too far?" I stared at him. "What's that supposed to mean? Do you even know how long Ryan was in the hospital? And what does that have to do with me?" I replied flatly. "Just so you know, I'm married." "No way," he scoffed. "You really made up a lie like that?" "Sk, Natalie, I swear, you're unreal. What, you think you're the only woman in the world? That only you and Ryan count?" He choked on his own words after that, clearly running out of steam. In the end, all he could toss at me was, "Natalie, don't come crying when you regret this." The more I thought about it, the more it irritated me. I mean, Ethan had even pinned our marriage license photo to the top of his profile for everyone to see. But I'll admit, I still had a bit of fear inside me. After what happened with Ryan, people in our circle had always looked at me like I was some kind of joke. Running into Ryan's friends again made me realize something. The more I tried to avoid them, the more they felt entitled to push boundaries. So I posted a wedding photo on my social media with a simple caption, "I've been happy for a long time." That same night, Ethan, who was on a business trip out of town, flew back immediately. He looked absolutely overjoyed, not even trying to hide it. That evening, we went out to a private kitchen for dinner, but for some reason, my stomach was unsettled. I had no appetite at all. Ethan got worried and wanted to take me to the hospital, but I waved him off. I figured I was just grossed out by something at that networking event. He thought maybe the food wasn't to my taste, so when we got home, he made me a bowl of his signature noodles. I barely managed one bite before a wave of nausea hit me. I clutched the bathroom sink, nearly in tears. This time, I didn't try to play it off. We got in the car and drove straight to the hospital. Then came a piece of news that completely shocked me. I was pregnant. Ethan's reaction was intense. One minute he was ecstatic about the baby, the next he was panicking over my morning sickness. I leaned back against the pillow, watching him. His eyes looked like deep pools of water, filled with nothing but reflections of me. So this is what happiness feels like, when it's right there in front of you. Once we got home, I practically became the family's panda. Ethan monitored all my meals and made sure I rested properly. He even canceled a bunch of work just to be with me. I laughed and said he was being ridiculous, but he just grinned and replied, "I'm not being ridiculous. Making money is just a means to an end. The real life is here, being together as a family." As I entered the later stages of pregnancy, I slept more and more. One evening, while I was dozing, Ethan was gently massaging my swollen legs when the phone rang. The number was familiar yet strange. When I answered, an angry voice demanded, "Natalie, didn't anyone tell you I've been in the hospital this whole time?" Before I could respond, Ethan snatched the phone from me. My wife is pregnant, don't bother her. Then he hung up without waiting for a reply. Of course, the call came again. Ethan looked completely fed up. I quickly blocked the number. Ryan's drama really had no end. Later, when Yara and I were out grocery shopping, I received a message from an unknown number. Natalie, do you really think that just by forcing it, you can keep him? Do you even know how much he loves me? That car accident you two had, he was only upset because I'd broken up with him that night. Want to test your luck with another runaway groom? Yara read the message over my shoulder and exploded. She snatched the phone from me and dialed back. You piece of trash. Are you done yet? You treat that balding loser like he's some rare gem? Then keep him locked away and stop embarrassing yourself in public. My best friend is already married and pregnant. How many times do we have to say it before it sinks into your pathetic little brain? Is your self-delusion evolving by the day? Let me tell you, if you harass her again, I'll post everything online and let normal people see just how disgusting and pathetic you both are. I stood frozen beside her, stunned by how fiercely my usually polite and graceful best friend could curse someone out. She handed the phone back to me, took a deep breath, and said, I know you're not supposed to get emotional right now. Don't worry, I've got you. Let your sister handle the insults. Meanwhile, Ryan sat frozen in a hospital, staring at the photo Sean had shown him, the one from my wedding. In it, I was smiling so brightly. He couldn't help but wonder, when they had taken their wedding photos, what kind of expression had Sherry worn? That house I sold? The one Ryan and I had once lived in together? The buyer behind the scenes was actually Sherry. She didn't even know why she'd done it. The moment she found out I was selling it, she secretly arranged to have someone buy it. But even after the paperwork went through, she never dared to step inside. Lately, Sherry had been constantly picking fights with him. She would scream and cry, asking whether he regretted everything. But he couldn't give her an answer. He didn't know what to say. Maybe he had just grown too used to having me around. Maybe he assumed that bond between us still existed, that because he had once loved me so deeply, it should still count for something. But he had gone too far. He waited in the hospital, day after day, hoping I would show up. But when the doctor told him he could finally be discharged, I never came. His heart felt utterly hollow in that moment. He couldn't resist making the call. From the other end, a man's voice answered, and then, shortly after, Ryan received a photo of me and Ethan's wedding from Sean. He had never felt so panicked before. The moment he was discharged from the hospital, he rushed back to the home he had once decorated so meticulously. But there was nothing left of him there. Not even a trace. The couple's toothbrushes on the bathroom sink were gone. The wedding photo, gone. Everything. He checked the time, then jumped into his car and sped off. He drove aimlessly through the city, trying to remember where we had taken our wedding photos. After searching block after block, he finally found the shop tucked in a small alley. He went in and asked the photographer for our picture. The photographer gave him a mocking look. It's been so long. Where am I supposed to find it? Didn't your wife keep a copy? Ryan stayed silent. The photographer rolled his eyes in disgust and turned away to help another customer. But suddenly, Ryan grabbed his arm, agitated. You can find it, right? I'll pay. I have money. Reluctantly, the photographer dug through the archives on his computer. After a long search, he finally found our wedding photo. Ryan stared at the image of me, smiling so radiantly, and felt like his chest had been punched through. Dazed and shattered, he took the photo back home and re-hung it on the wall. Sherry kept calling him, but he didn't pick up. Furious, she texted him. You're pathetic, Ryan. Absolutely pathetic. You only want what you can't have. That's the only reason she ever mattered to you. He looked at the message and laughed bitterly. He wasn't even mad. He couldn't deny that part of what she said was true. He had gotten used to me always being there, always treating him well. He had just assumed I would never leave. That night, he drank heavily, chain-smoked until the ashtray was full. The living room stank of smoke and alcohol. It reminded him of the first time he and Sherry broke up. Back then, even after nights like this, he'd wake up to a spotless apartment and a breakfast note that read, Ryan, can today be a good day? But now, there was nothing. Just an unbearable emptiness. He dragged himself off the sofa, trying to find anything of mine left in the house. He searched through the night until morning, but there was nothing. Not a single trace. Even the tulips I used to grow on the balcony were withered and brown. He tried to catch up on what had happened in my life. The video account I used to post on, every single clip that had anything to do with him had been erased. My new life was filled with someone else. Someone who loved and accompanied me. Looking at those posts, he felt a deep ache. His eyes turned red. Then he found the old giveaway post on my account where I raffled off his gifts. Patiently, he tried to contact the winners, offering to buy the items back. But one fan, sharp-eyed and sarcastic, immediately figured out who he was. They mocked him brutally and told him all the items had already been resold or donated in my name. He didn't dare read the comments anymore. The fans were vicious, each word cutting deeper than the last. In a final act of desperation, he went to the store and bought a replica of the matching couple's watch we used to wear. That day, he wanted to try just once more. But what he saw was me, heavily pregnant, being gently supported by Ethan. At that moment, he didn't even have the courage to go up to me. The last time I saw Ryan was when our daughter was 3 years old. We ran into each other at Disneyland. He was standing in line and bought her a Lena Bell plushie. I coldly pulled my daughter to my side without taking the toy. Ryan looked visibly hurt. "Natalie, do things really have to be this distant between us?" he asked. "Do you remember how we survived that car accident together? I was terrified something would happen to you." "Oh, so I was supposed to thank you for almost getting me killed?" I replied coldly. His mind went blank. That was when he realized I had known all along. All those times he used that accident to guilt me, it no longer worked. He stood in Disneyland for a long, long time, watching as our little family of 3 disappeared into the crowd. From that moment on, I completely erased him from my life. Years passed. When our daughter turned 10, I suddenly received a notice, an inheritance gift from Ryan. He had died, stomach cancer. They said he'd been drinking himself to death for years. Reading the message, I felt a mix of emotions. Mostly, I was speechless. It was like Ryan had never truly grown up. He never took responsibility for anything in his life. Honestly, with our current lifestyle, I didn't care about that inheritance. I returned it to his parents. Downstairs, Ethan was waiting quietly in the car. I thought to myself, maybe Ryan did give me one good thing. He ran fast enough at that wedding. Otherwise, who knows how many more years of pain I would have had to endure. Back home, our daughter came running to me, soft and sweet, wrapping her arms around my waist. Ethan stood beside the grill, barbecuing for the 2 of us. And from the moment happiness found me, it never left again.